Hi, welcome to Anxiety Ave. This is Gypsy, and I am filming today at my friend's house in her wonderful yard, and it's a really nice day today. So shout out to my homegirl Jackie, who is allowing me to do this. Today we're going to be talking about the stereotypes of autism and Asperger syndrome, and whether or not some of that stuff applies or... There are a lot of stereotypes. I'm not going to say that they're true or false. I'm just going to say that some of it, like the reasoning behind some of that stuff, I'm going to try to give you guys explanations for that stuff. So I just have like a list of things that I hear people saying or beliefs that I've heard about people who have autism and Asperger's. One of the things is that they're dangerous or like, I don't know, can't like control themselves when they get upset. Like I hear a lot of people who have children that have autism talking about how their kids have temper tantrums and just kind of freak out when they're out in public and they can't, like they get triggered by stuff that freaks them out. So therefore, there's this connotation that people who have Asperger's or autism are dangerous, and that's not true. I think it all depends on the person and how much help they're getting for coping skills. My son has Asperger syndrome, and he wasn't diagnosed until he was already in middle school. But he used to have these like outbursts at school where he would throw things when he would get really upset, but that was because he had a hard time communicating with the teacher about what was getting him upset. He didn't know how to use, a verbal method of expressing himself. So at the time we didn't know that that autism was even a part of anything going on with him, but through training and giving alternate methods of dealing with frustration, he broke himself out of that, so he didn't have that problem anymore. I feel like it really depends on the person, and even neurotypical people can have really scary outbursts when they get upset if they don't know good coping mechanisms for how to deal with their anger. Another one is that people who have autism have a low IQ. Sometimes people actually mistake autism for mental retardation, but they're not the same thing, and I think that I don't know where that comes from. I just think it's because there's not that much awareness on autism, because I myself didn't know anything about autism until my nephew got diagnosed with it, and then that's what prompted me to do more research. But it's definitely false that people who have it do not have a high IQ. For example, my IQ is only a few points short of what they consider genius, and then my son, he was like 12 or 13 when he got diagnosed, and his IQ was like 115 or something. And then my nephew, who first got diagnosed when he was like 4 or 5, he could spell words and memorize things he saw on TV, like scripts. He could memorize them, lyrics to songs, before he could even really talk properly. So nobody taught him his alphabet, but he could read. He could like put letters together and make words. We don't know how he was able to do that, but obviously you can't do that if you're stupid. So that connotation is totally false. There is a huge stereotype about communication, that people who have autism do not know how to talk or don't know how to communicate. This one, I will say, to some degree is true, but it depends, again, on the person. I don't think that it's that we don't know how to communicate. It's that the way that we communicate cannot be interpreted by neurotypical people who don't understand that individual's way of communicating. For example, again, with my nephew, if you asked him, what do you want to eat for lunch? Instead of saying, I want a burger, he would just say like a catchphrase from a McDonald's commercial. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever the catchphrase was. I don't remember it anymore, but that's how he would respond to you. So if you didn't know that was his way of saying, I want to eat a burger, you would just think he's not answering your question. And the whole thing about like not being able to talk, I think it really depends on the person. There are some non-speaking autistic people, and I don't think it's because they don't know how to talk. I think they do, but they just choose not to for whatever reason. Like I heard a vlog years ago. I don't remember who the person was, what channel it was even, but it was a girl who was autistic. She had been nonverbal for years, like her entire childhood. And then somewhere in her teens, I think she was getting counseling or something. But like later on, when she started to actually verbalize, she was so articulate, and she was explaining like that whole time I wasn't talking, I could talk, but I didn't want to talk. And I would just make sounds and noises because that was my way of stimming. And talking, like the act of talking, was almost like painful for her. It was very uncomfortable for her, so she just chose not to talk. But I'm not going to say that's true for everyone who has autism, but it's still kind of like a big mystery why people who have autism that are on certain ends of the spectrum, why they don't talk. But I don't think it's because they're not able to, and I don't think it's because they don't understand other people when we're talking to them. I think that they can understand us for the most part. I used to have a Sunday school student who was nonverbal, and she was autistic. Her parents were Korean. Like, the Korean culture is so like blind to a lot of these disorders and mental issues in general, but her parents didn't really know what autism was. Like, they didn't understand it. And I remember her having like freakouts in our classes. But I noticed she could draw really well. Like, if you just left her alone, she was always drawing, and everything she drew looked like Powerpuff Girls. So once I realized that she drew well, when I was in class with the kids, I gave her and all the other students paper and drawing materials instead of like a questionnaire or a reading thing. I just did it in a way so that everyone else was doing what she was comfortable doing. And I would ask the class questions. I would like read them, excerpts or whatever the Bible lesson was that day, and then show them some pictures, and then I would request that they respond to my questions by drawing pictures. And when we did that, she blended right into the class. She still wasn't talking. Like, she would say stuff, but it didn't make sense to people that were around her. But the pictures that she drew always fit the context of the questions I was asking. So that's how I knew she was paying attention and she could understand us when we were all talking, even though she wasn't responding to us verbally. So again, that's a stereotype, and I think we need to do more research on why people who don't speak, why they don't do it. I don't think it's because they can't. I just feel that that's not the way they choose to communicate. They don't like it. They don't want to do that. So that's a big part of why they don't. But again, like I said, I think it's a stereotype. So if you're running into people who are autistic who don't talk, you should not assume that they can't talk or that they don't understand you. So if you say things around them that could be like offensive, they can probably understand everything you're saying. They seem like they're like tuned out. Like, sometimes they're like doing something and they seem like they're not really paying attention to anything going on around them. But I feel like to some degree they're still absorbing what's going on, even if they're not showing that. So that goes along with what I had on here: temper tantrums, things like that. These like outbursts, these fatigue that will just come over you mentally that makes you just like don't know how to respond sometimes. And even me, I feel like I've had moments like that where I just don't know what else to say to make the person in front of me leave me alone. Like, they're just asking me too many questions. They're asking me questions I cannot answer, and a lot of it is centered around like social issues, social norms, a way of like explaining my behaviors to people who don't understand that I'm not socially interested in whatever is going on. And so I'll get really frustrated and kind of just flip out. You know what I'm saying? So, I just got a text from my homegirl Diane. She flew across the country to go do some work to go help out the people in Louisiana that are dealing with flooding and hurricane problems. And that's nice of her to do that. So I hope she's having a good time over there. I know she went over there to work, but shout out. Hi, Diane. Okay, so let's see. Oh yeah, this is the big one. I always hear people saying that people who have autism do not like to be touched, and that they will freak out on you if you touch them or try to hug them or stand too close to them or get in their personal space. And this is another one that I think is like true and false. for me, I've always been an affectionate person, and I feel like I express my emotions a lot through touch and through like hugging and holding hands and smooching and cuddling my friends and my family, to the point where it's almost like borderline inappropriate. Like, people don't know how to interpret it, I guess, sometimes, because I'm like overly open and overly affectionate with people who I like. But that for me comes from growing up in a very affectionate household. So my mom never had her mother hold her hand or touch her or hug her or show her any affection, and that traumatized her growing up, and that made her feel unloved. So she like made a vow to herself that when she had children, she was never gonna make them feel that way. So she did the complete opposite. Like, my mother will hold my hand walking down the street someplace to this day, even right now. If she was here and we're like, oh, let's go to Walmart to go get some groceries, bro, she will walk through the whole Walmart holding my hand. So, but now it's like problematic because I'm older and we're both adults. So if we're walking around holding hands, like, people will think we're a couple, even though she's my mom. And the few times when people have like said things that made her think that they thought we were a couple, she will get so offended. Like, she will flip out because she's like so anti like LGBT, right? She's so narrow-minded. But anyway, but she'll get so like freaked out. But I'm like, well, that's what happens when you walk around holding people's hands and y'all are grown. Like, you didn't know that. You know what I mean? But again, like I said, it's a stereotype that's based on a group of people who are in the spectrum that don't like to be touched. But it's not that just by default they don't like to be touched by people. A lot of that has to do with sensory processing problems, and sometimes when like the texture of somebody's hand or skin touching yours, it's cringy, and like that person doesn't like it. Like, they just don't like the actual physical sensation of skin on their skin, you know? So that's the reason why a lot of those people don't like to be touched. It's not because they don't want affection, and it's not because they don't like you. It's literally a physical reaction that they're having. It's almost like they're allergic to people rubbing them, touching them unexpectedly. I know some people who have autism that if they see it coming, they're more welcoming towards it. If you like tell them, can I give you a hug? Or like if they say like, do you mind if I put my hand here? If you're more kind of give them a warning, they can prepare themselves for the sensation and they won't freak out. But if you just come out of nowhere and just give them a hug, like, that could make them really uncomfortable. So that's what it is. It's not just that they don't like to be touched in general. And everybody who has autism and Asperger's doesn't feel that way. Like, a lot of people are like me, the complete opposite. Or like, I'm to the point where people will think that I'm being like sexually harassed by someone. Like, they'll be like, that person's trying to like molest you. Like, they're trying to get a feel up on you. And I won't see it. Like, I won't interpret it that way because it doesn't feel like that to me, you know? So that's just me though. I don't know. But that's how I know, like, this is just a stereotype. Everybody don't feel like that. And like my son, he's not the kind of person that will initiate affection with others, but if you give it to him, he'll receive it. So if you like try to hug him, he's not gonna run away from you or freak out, but he won't just walk up to you and try to give you a hug. Like, he's so awkward when he tries to do that it's like you laugh when he does it because it's funny, but he doesn't really know how to initiate it, so he won't. But again, that's the social awkwardness that goes on with people who have autism. It's like difficult for them to figure out when is the right time to do something, when is too much and when is not enough. Like, that's really difficult for them to discern. There's a stereotype that people with autism cannot function without routines being put in place for them, and that if you change their strict routines, that they will not know what to do with themselves. Again, I feel like this is somewhat true, but it's somewhat false. It really depends on the person. This is the thing about autism. It's a spectrum disorder because everyone who deals with this stuff, it's like to a degree they're dealing with this, with each individual problem. And for some people, it's worse on one end and not so bad on the other. Like for me, I can talk, I can say what I want to say very well. And for the most part, I can articulate myself. But then certain things I don't know how to say right. And when I say it in the moment, I think I am saying it right. But the person on the other end receiving it, they'll be like, why did you say that to me? Like, they'll get really upset because they didn't like the way that I said it, or they'll think that I meant something other than what I thought I said. And it's so hard for me to like rewind and backtrack to what it was that I was initially trying to get across, because it makes sense to me. So I'm trying to figure out, how can I word this so that it makes sense to you? I don't think like you, so I don't know how I'm supposed to say this so that you get the message I was trying to convey. It's you don't see that so much in videos, because most of the stuff, I'm not gonna say it's scripted, but like, I have bullet points that I'm trying to make that I thought about before I started filming. But if I'm just having a spontaneous conversation with someone, like, I will just blurt things out that I probably shouldn't have said, or I'll say it in a way that comes off really condescending, or comes off like, I don't know, it just doesn't come off the way I'm trying to convey it. The emotion behind what I'm saying does not always translate. That can be a problem. So like, the routine thing, I feel like that's true and false, because if you are the kind of person who needs those routines to function, then in your case that's true. But some people, their routines are not what other people consider routines. Like I always say that I have a very controlled environment at my house, but people, when they come to my house, they don't see any of it. It's not overt. It's not something that they notice, but it's there. Like, for example, like, I always have dolls out in my house somewhere. Like right now I have them displayed on top of my kitchen cabinets because I have nowhere else to put them because our apartment is small. But normally when I was like, in my usual space that I'm used to having, there were dolls in every room. Almost every room that I went into, there were dolls. And like, because people know I'm a doll collector, they probably would just assume, oh, they're just decorations. Like, she just has them in here because they're cute to look at. But I actually have them as they're part of my stimming routine, like styling them, clothing them, posing them, photographing them, doing all that stuff gives me a sense of like calmness, and it reduces my anxiety. So they're really there as a therapy tool for me, but they just blend in with the household decoration. So people don't think that that's part of my routine. They don't realize that that's why they're there. But when they're gone, like right now, I packed up all my dolls because we thought we were moving, and like, the kitchen cabinets are all empty. There's nothing on top of there. And every time I walk by it, like, I feel this sense of like dread and anxiety. And it's triggered by really nothing. Like, there's no reason for me to feel anxious, but I just do. And then I'll look up at the cabinets expecting to see these faces looking back at me. And like, that's my usual routine. That's what I'm used to doing to calm myself. But then when I do it, there's nothing there. So it makes the anxiety worse. And then so I'll have like a loose doll here and there, like in my bedroom or something, but they're always around. And sometimes it's to the point, like, if I have like a doctor's appointment and I'm really nervous about it, I'll take my dolls with me to the doctor's appointment. Like, they're in the car with me. So when I show up to the appointment holding a Barbie doll, the people who work there are like, what the hell is going on? But usually when I tell them I have Asperger syndrome and I have really bad anxiety about needles and things like that, they'll just back off. But like, that's because they're in the medical field, so they understand that for the most part. But if I say had like a job interview, no, they're not going to understand that. They're going to be like, that's crazy. What are you talking about? Why did you bring your Barbie doll to this job interview? You know what I'm saying? But that's reality in the mind of a person who's got autism. So if it's not something as like noticeable as a doll, it's gonna be something like, you're gonna have this something that helps you to stim so that you can calm yourself down when you're in socially anxious situations. Yeah, so I don't think that everyone needs a strict routine, and that if you change the routine they're going to freak out. I think that it really depends on the person, and slight changes to the routines don't really mess everything up for the person. For me, a lot of my routines are self-made routines. They're not things that other people set in place for me to do, but like, I have to do those routines my way. Like, I have to do it my way. I can't follow other people's protocols. Like, I have to tweak it so that it fits me. There is a huge stereotype that people who are autistic have no imagination and they're not creative people. And that's completely wrong. I feel like there's so many like artists, people like my son, for example, who draws, they're so creative and they think completely differently than the average person does or would, so they can come up with really innovative ideas that totally good at problem solving. But the issue here is that I think the number of ideas that people who have autism come up with is drastically lower than the ideas that mainstream people are coming up with for certain things. It's just the kind of idea that we'll come up with is so innovative, so outside the box, that the people who came up with the long list of ideas will be like, oh, how did you think of that? And I don't know. We don't know the answers to those questions. We don't know, because a lot of times I feel like people that have autism, they think in pictures, visualize everything in their head before they even execute it. And like for me, I relate it to like TV screens. I'll say that there's like 60 TVs going at the same time in my mind, and I'm trying to focus on one screen at a time. The problem is that the only screens that I can easily focus on are the ones that are showing things I'm interested in already. But if it's something that I'm not interested in, I have a way of just ignoring those screens. Like, I know they're there, it's blurry, I can't like focus on it, so I have to do things to like create less distractions for myself so that I can focus on the things that other people think are important. But if you just leave me alone to be in my creative space, I will come up with lyrics, poems, like doll stuff, customizing stuff, artistic stuff, movie scripts, like all kinds of things that you just don't have time to be thinking about in your day-to-day. You know what I mean? But the creativity that comes out when I am allowed to just be in my creative zone is insane. Like, to the point where after I'm done, I'll look at the thing and be like, how did I think of that? Like, how did I come up with this? I don't know. You know what I mean? And I discovered a lot of that stuff when I was working on my first channel, crafting for the dolls, making sets for different skits that we were doing. We were coming up with ideas on the spot, and then I would have to craft some kind of prop to use in the script, use in the set. I mean, like instantly. I'd have to figure it out on the spot before we lost the momentum. And that's how we came up with a lot of really innovative ideas, like the teeth removal tutorial that I have that was like blew up. It was like viral pretty much, and almost everybody in the doll collecting community who works with fashion dolls now use the broken dolly method to remove teeth from their dolls' mouths. So that really just came out of necessity. I was getting so frustrated with seeing these big goofy looking smiles on a lot of the dolls whose sculpts I liked, and I was like, well, why can't we just take the teeth out and close the mouth, like literally perform plastic surgery? Why is that not a thing? And why can't I find any tutorials on this? How am I the only person who has this frustration? Turns out I wasn't, because when I shared that video, I mean, so many views on that video, like constantly people were like, bro, like, thank you so much for putting this up here, because I've been trying to figure this out for ages, you know? But when people ask me, like, how did you come up with that? I don't have an answer to. I don't know how I came up with it. I just did. I don't know. But my brain just does stuff like that. You know, it'll just pop ideas into my head, and I'll be like, where did that come from? I have no clue. The last two things on my list, the first one is hygiene. That there's like a really bad hygiene amongst people that have autism. This one, I will say, there's a legit stereotype, because I feel like, I'm not gonna say it's true. That makes it seem like everybody who has it does this. No, but there's a good reason why this is a stereotype. I feel like it's based in truth, and that's because I think people who have these issues with the sensory problems, again, that's what we're going back to, the sensory problem. I call these things invisible disabilities, because like, if you're blind, people know you can't see. You're not imagining it. They're not like, oh, you're just making it up, it's just in your head. No, you really cannot see, and like, people will accommodate you based on that, right? If you say water hurts my skin, people will be like, what the hell are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, how can that even be a thing? It sounds insane. And because it's not like a medical condition that people recognize right away, they will dismiss it. They'll talk about it like whatever, that you can't have a problem like that. Like, that's not allowed. So you better figure it out. You better go take a shower, right? But some people that have this condition, when the sensation of the liquid touching their skin, it like stings them, and they don't like it. It feels like pins, like needles, just, pricking them everywhere. And that sensation is what stops them from washing their hands or taking a complete correct shower or grooming themselves properly. Like, I remember when I was a kid, when I would brush my hair, and like my hair texture is very like curly and wild and dry. So I had no idea how to take care of my hair when I was a kid. And like being mixed, it's even worse because you can't do the usual regimen that people from your race with your hair texture do. So things that work on my mom's hair does not work on my hair. Things that worked on my black family's hair, that stuff don't work on my hair. So I have to find some kind of medium in between to properly care for my hair. And now I kind of know how to do that. But like back in the day, like I had no idea whatsoever, right? So when people would want to like brush my hair or comb my hair, I would freak out because my scalp was so tender that any little bit of tugging on my hair roots was very painful to me, and like would like always make my head feel like it was really sore. I knew that wasn't normal. Like I knew this is ridiculous that I have such a sensitive head, but it was a real thing. And like in the black community, I know there's this term tender-headed that black people use, and you hear that mostly when you are talking about how some girls will get really like sensitive when you try to like braid their hair. Like a lot of black girls will style their hair in braids, and some of those braids are attached to the scalp, so they're braiding like a French braid, like braiding cornrows onto your head. They have to pull on the hair on your scalp in order to lay those braids down flat. I could not stand that, and like that sensitivity, there's a term for that in the black community because it's so prevalent, and very commonly people will run into that. But nobody was trying to braid my hair. Like just brushing my hair, I would freak out. And I remember one time there was like a huge knot in my hair of just like all of these tangles and waves and curls that had it matted together. Like I don't even know how it got like that. It was like a huge giant dreadlock just in the middle of my head. And I remember my aunt on my dad's side of the family, she like saw my hair and she was like, "Girl, how did your hair get like this? Like, don't you have a mother? Like, what happened?" My mom never even touched me and my sister's hair. She would not style our hair because she would get so frustrated with our texture, she wouldn't know what to do with it. So she would never touch our hair. And my dad, who used to style our hair, at that time he was dead already. So like it was just me and my sister trying to figure out what to do with our hair. And I remember it getting like really crazy matted up. And I swear that knot was in my head for the longest. Like I want to say months, but it might have even been like over a year, like a whole entire school grade. I feel like I went with that knot in my hair. But the terror of brushing it out when it was probably still a small knot was what prevented me from just doing that and then clearing the knot out. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's just an example that I'm using for that pertains to me, but other people have different kinds of issues like that they have to deal with. But it's just the pain, the sensation of the pain that stops them from grooming themselves properly. And this is why the stereotype, I feel like it has some grounds in truth. But it's not one of those things where the person just doesn't care. Like they don't care about their hygiene. That's not what it is. It's like they just don't know how to manage it well. So when they're given tips, when they're given some help, and family members can come in and kind of like coach them through different things that they're having problems with, don't feel shy. Like don't feel like I'm gonna offend them if I tell them they need better hygiene routines. They need help. Like you need to help them and walk them through some of that stuff, even if you think that they're gonna be offended that you notice that they needed help. Like if my aunt didn't just cut that thing out of my hair, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I would just be bald because I would have probably let the knot go just indefinitely. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? And then the last thing I have is their inability or lack of interest in dating. And that, I think, is one of the worst stereotypes about people who have autism, that they're not interested in having a love life, or that they're not able to have a love life. I don't think that that's true. I guess you can say I'm an example because I'm married and I've been with the same person for 12 years. But granted, he didn't know that I have autism. I didn't know either. But I don't know, maybe if we had known earlier, things would have been slightly different. Maybe, I don't know. But I don't think so. I feel like he's not the only relationship that I have been in. I had been with other people prior to that, and I don't think that my autism interfered with our relationships. I think if anything, it just makes your personality very distinct. Like, you have a really, really distinct, you have likes, you have dislikes, you have preferences, you have ideologies, you have routines. You just have a very distinct way of doing things and thinking about things. And if the person who you're dating doesn't really appreciate that about you, then of course that's not going to work out. But that's true for anyone, not just people who have autism. And there are people who are neurotypical that have relationships that are having a hard time, just struggling in relationships because they don't know what to do with their partners. They don't know how to behave when they're dealing with the opposite gender. They don't know how to interpret what the opposite gender is thinking or doing. And that's a very common issue that just people in general have. So this one, I feel like, is totally a false stereotype, and I feel like you should not discount dating somebody who has autism or Asperger's, because you might actually like them a lot better than regular people. Just because of the way that, you know, they do things and their approach to things are just totally different. And I think my Asperger's makes me more open-minded. Even though I have my way of doing things, I feel like I'm more open to learning new ways of doing things, new information, because I know I don't know everything. Like, I know I'm missing out on some things. So I feel more open to learning from other people and from different cultures and just in general, you know. But it's definitely it's a negative stereotype that is not true. So I do think that a lot of the people that have problems dating, it's because of their social problems, their social interactions. Like, they don't really know what to do or what to say, or like I said, you don't know what's inappropriate, what's too much, what's not enough. You don't really have that like measuring stick. So that's what makes things more difficult. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of people will say to me like, oh, I like that you're very blunt. Like, you'll just say what you want to say and get straight to the point and not try to sugarcoat things. And I've never been around somebody who does that, but it's so refreshing that you do that. And like, I get that a lot from people, and I didn't even realize that that's like, that's a thing. Like, people aren't blunt. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't realize that was even a thing. But now I do. So I think that the honesty aspect of it, people who are dating you can really appreciate that about you, because they don't have to worry about you trying to like be dishonest and play tricks on them and play mind games with them, you know. They're more like, especially I feel like guys who have autism, they're a little bit more upfront, they're a little bit more real. Girls, it's different for us, I think, because we are taught from a young age to be manipulative and kind of, and I'm not gonna say secretive, just like women are taught not to trust people blindly and to kind of like keep things to themselves, I guess. I don't know. It's just because like women have more at stake if things go wrong in a relationship, and it's harder for them to recover from it and like bounce back. So this is part of the reason why the female gender is just in general, at least here in the Western society, they're just kind of like encouraged to be more cautious and careful when they're dealing with people who they're dating. So that's why we do that, but not because that's just what you're supposed to do or that's what's good for you to do. So guys who have autism, I feel like they're not so encouraged by that type of thinking. That culture doesn't really exist for men, but for women it's prevalent from early childhood, everyone's always telling you to be cautious. So even if you're not, it's not in your nature to be devious. What's the word I'm looking for? Deceptive. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay, it's not in your nature to be as deceptive as a female, but you kind of have to learn to do that to survive femaleness, because you're a target for a lot of people who are being predatory towards you. I know that's a horrible thing to to think, and like to live every day thinking people are trying to target you. But this is the kind of the same thing as like the whole Black Lives Matter movement. I feel like people treat minorities like they're just imagining that people are targeting them. But when you're dealing with that all the time and you experience it all the time, it doesn't matter what other people say. You're going to believe that that's true. And for you, it is true. So, you know, I know guys don't like to hear women talk like this because they're like, I'm not a rapist. I'm not going to attack you. I'm not into that. I'm not with that. I get it. You individually aren't, but there are high percentages of males doing this stuff to females. And I mean, it's just statistics. You don't hear all these stories about men getting raped by women. Like, that's just not physically even possible for you to do unless you're really like, you're getting really creative. You know what I'm saying? So like, for girls, any little mistake you make could lead you down a road where you have to stand in a court and talk about it to somebody. And because we have that reality and that fear that we don't want that to be our reality, it's just part of the female gender's culture to kind of encourage women to shield themselves with deception. And that's why you'll see like girls walking down the street and you try to ask them what time it is and they're like, I got a man, I'm married, I gotta go. Like, and you're like, I just wanted to know what time it was, relax, you know. But that's where that comes from, you know. But people who have autism, I feel like it's not really in our nature to just start off that way. It's like you have to really be groomed to think on a manipulative level. It's difficult for people who have autism to think that way because everything is so straightforward for us, and like we just want to say what it is, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, so that's everything on my list today, and hopefully that helps somebody to kind of analyze their situation. Or maybe some people who you know have autism or whatever, like you should try to befriend them and talk to them and learn more about them, because they're still an individual. There are things that like umbrella statement affects all of us in a different degree, but it's gonna affect each individual person differently. So you just have to learn that person's personality in order to interact with them well. And that's all I have for you. So I will see you guys in the next video. Again, shout out to my homegirl, Jackie. And I will talk to y'all later on Anxiety Ave. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Gypsy Vibe. And I will talk to y'all in the next video. Peace.